And so what role do genes actually play in our mental health now? If we look at it in terms of, if we can almost tip the balance the other way now, in terms of we've spoken about almost underemphasizing the role of genes, but if we're able to distill down the role that they do play, what actually is that?
Okay, well, I think of two different types of genes as influencing our well-being. And these are called state-dependent genes and activity-dependent genes that influence us on an everyday basis. Now, what are our state-dependent genes? Apparently, our state-dependent genes relate to things like eating, sleeping, basic rhythms of life, the basic functioning of our bodies and minds through the day. So they're our state-dependent genes, and they love, if you like, helpful regularity or routine. Then you get our activity-dependent genes. And these are the genes to do with neuroplasticity or neurogenesis. So we know that right throughout life, you create new brain cells and connections between them with physical exercise and novelty or new learning. And that new learning can also include a bit of moderate stress. Just so if we face moderate stress in our lives or work, or we have some challenges to deal with in how we manage a family situation with the changes in our lifestyle this year, for example, well, that actually can focus our creative efforts or our different flexible ways of thinking of dealing with things. That would also be our activity-dependent genes. And so I think that there's probably something in a balance in life in helping our state-dependent genes function better through having helpful routines, especially around things like eating and sleeping and regular routines in life. But also, how do we engage our activity-dependent genes? How can we promote that joy and interest in life and engagement and making life worthwhile using physical exercise as part of a mainstay for our health? But then beyond that, how we generate those new brain connections with that new learning and that engagement in novelty.
It's interesting as you're talking about that there, because it seems to me that there's potentially a bit of a tension between those two in terms of, if you look at state-dependent genes in terms of developing routines, activity-dependent genes in terms of orienting ourselves towards novelty. Well, it's potentially the case that the more we develop routines in life, the less novelty that we're potentially going to experience throughout that. So how would you describe the interplay there? Is there necessarily one that's, for example, more important than the other to prioritise in times of stress?
I think this gives a real clue, that sort of tension between those two things, that it seems to relate to a main challenge in life and any living system that we would have alluded to before. It's the challenge between chaos and order. Like, there's something very good about order, isn't there? Like, if we've got our routines, we know where we stand, and now we know it actually helps the functioning of our body and mind through these state-dependent genes. If we've got that regularity, those routines working for us, and we are eating and sleeping better, then that's going to help our mental health functioning, including whether other problematic genes might be expressed or activated or not. So there's that benefit of order. But just say, if everything was order, if everything's the same all the time, like, how would life be worth living? That would be a real Groundhog Day. So we need novelty, which is kind of like chaos, unpredictable, don't know what will happen next, mixing things up a little bit. We find that in our everyday lives. We need fun, we need enjoyment, we need something different. Something out of left field can interest us. If the challenges that we face that we're not quite sure how we're going to deal with, well, there can be some kind of stimulation or new learning in that. So, yeah, I think that might get back to that basic challenge in life about chaos and order. And so it's interesting that relates to different types of genes.